Hey, good to have you back. So today I want to spend a bit of time explaining or sharing how I would look to build a recruitment business that could generate 7 or 8 figures in under 2 years. But not only that, but one that's future proof that could look to defend itself against things like AI or like future market trends and threats, like we've gone through with, COVID, economic challenges and the likes. So hopefully that resonates. It's the reason why you're here today, and let's get stuck in. So welcome back to the channel. If you've not watched before, my name is Stuart Juggins, and I've decided to create this channel really to share my experience around business transformation and business growth, specifically around what I do. And what I do is I'm a business transformation consultant, probably the easiest way to explain it. In essence, I go into businesses and I help them evolve. I help them create higher margins, higher revenue, expand their service portfolio, create better business, right? So probably thinking, well, why am I going to listen to this guy talk to me about how I'm going to build a business? And the principles that I'm laying out, they apply to pretty much any business, certainly any service-driven business, and even product-based businesses. But my area of expertise is really the recruitment industry. So just very quickly, what have I done in that industry? Well, I've been a business consultant independently for over 6 years. And during that time, I have personally advised, guided over 40 companies to create new revenue streams, higher margin revenue streams, build new service offerings, transform their business. I've done turnarounds, I've done high scale businesses. That is all culminated in excess of $330 million of new revenue fees. And I would say, each business has done easily over 5 million of new revenue at higher margins. Now, beyond that, I've also advised and consulted with well over 100 other businesses, again, mainly around recruitment, but also in other professional service areas. And I would say that I've coached in excess of 700 consultants on how to really go to market, win better business, uncover more problems, just win better revenue generating clients, in essence. So what I want to share with you today is an approach that I go through with my clients. It's a massively watered down approach because I could spend hours doing this. And in fact, I do actually have a program. It's called Accelerate and Elevate that I drive through my clients. If you've not seen any of my other videos, there's one where I actually explain what that program is. But I want to boil it down into what I would do in the first 90 to 120 days, so the first 3 to 4 months, to drive real activity in this space to really catapult this forward. So you can look at this video in one of two ways. You've either got a business already, it could be a recruitment business, or it could be any sort of service-based business. And by service-based, what I mean is you're not selling boxes or products per se. You are providing what you offer to a business is you're helping them fix problems, and you're doing that through using people, deploying people or outsourcing or bringing it in-house or whatever. It's very much an advisory type activity. And so you could either have that already, or you want to create a business from scratch. Now, the challenge with creating a business from scratch, of course, is you need some revenue, you need some sort of cash injection, or you need some investment to do that. But the principles are the same. The principles we're going to go through are the same. The way that I do these videos, it's very much off the cuff. I don't have a script. I've got a few bullet points over here. These are topics that I want to talk about and share thoughts and processes around. I'm sat in my office at home. It's a Saturday afternoon. And this is a channel I wanted to create because, I just come up against these sorts of issues time and time again. And I just want to help people really catapult their businesses forward and build more solid, stable, scalable businesses. So look, let's jump into it. What I'm going to go through the first 90, 120 days, like the approach I would go through, or the approach I take my clients through actually. So this is not just some random guy going, oh, this is what I think I'd do. This is tried and tested. This works. But like I said, I'm not going into total detail. I don't have the time. This video would be here till this evening. But yeah, so let's jump into it. So how would I do it? The first thing to get across is a concept called consultative selling, or building a consultative mindset. Everything I'm going to take you through is all about being consultative. If you don't know what that is, what that means, I'll break some of it down for you as we go, but I will have another video that explains what being consultative really means. No, it's not just about building a consultancy. It's about a mindset, it's an approach, it's about problem solving, it's about positioning, it's about understanding before we then try and fix and sell. So let's jump in. So the first thing we've got to really look at is where are we going to focus, right? So we've got to pick an area. So market focus. Now, usually this will come, you'll decide this in one or two ways. You're already operating in a space, or you've got an idea of something that interests you. The more that something interests you, or the more that you know about something, the better it is. You have to have a natural interest, because business is going to be hard. Things are going to be difficult. I would caveat, if you're already operating in a space, you have to be completely unbiased to what I am going to tell you. Just as a bit of a backstory, a lot of the clients I go into, they've been in their industry, in their markets for a long, long time. They've been servicing those types of clients for many, many years. So they think that they know their markets intimately. And yes, they do. They know what the market is doing, but they don't understand the buying demographic intimately. What I mean is the person who you're going to service who has a problem. They have just serviced that client in a very traditional way. They've not evolved beyond providing candidates or contractors or permanent hires. So remember, I'm talking about recruitment now, but it's the same if you're in the IT service space, if you're in a landscaping business, if you're in a healthcare industry. You need to come into this with a very open mindset, because some of the principles I'm talking about are going to be not new. They're certainly not new in the industry, in the world, but they may be new to you. So completely clean slate. So market focus. If you're going to an area that you know really, really well, we're going to probe and test that further. If you're going into a new market, then what attracts you to that? There has to be some sort of attraction to that. So it could be personal appetite, it could be, what you've seen through the press, through market research, whatever. But the one thing I would say that I see a lot of businesses make the focus is trying to do too much too soon. Less really is more. So focus on one industry, two at most if they are very, very related, but one industry and no more ideally. The next thing we need to do is we need to specialize within that industry. And it's called niching down, what's your niche? And again, this is not about finding your niche, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So we want to niche down further. Now let's just use an example. Let me think about one off the top of my head. Healthcare, right? Let's say we're going into the healthcare industry. Well, that's huge, right? So if you're in the UK, that's the whole of the NHS. The NHS is a multi-billion entity, and healthcare has many other factors that feed into that. So it could be things like physiotherapists, it could be dental, it could be, lots of other things that feed into that. Or it could be we're looking at the renewable energy market, right? But let's just focus on healthcare for a second. Now, within healthcare, where are we going to focus? Well, we could go after the physiotherapists. We could go after the orthodontists. We could go after IT services within that. We could go after a whole array. Now, remember, this comes back to what your core type of business is going to do. So I'm going to say, let's pick healthcare and let's go for social work, right? Social work services across the healthcare in the UK. So now that we've got a rough idea of our industry and our niche, what we want to know now is really what problems are we going to be servicing in that market. And there's a really key way that we find this out. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a process called problem identification. And in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to hone in on what's called an ICP, or our ideal customer profile, or our ideal persona, or avatar, call it whatever you want. But what we need to really do is find the individual in that sector, in that industry, in our niche that we want to service. And we're going to continually service them, and we're going to continually know them. So we're going to build relationships. So how do we do that? So we're focused on healthcare, we're focused on social work. So we may want to look at social work practice managers. By the way, I'm making this industry and ICP up. I've not done a lot in social work, to be totally honest. But it could be heads of social work for local government. It could be private social work consultancies, whatever. What we need to do is we need to get in front of those ICP, not all of them. We want to find 15 to 20, and we want to do something called discovery interviewing. So what we want to do is we want to understand what makes them tick. What do they do day to day? What's their job? What frustrates them? What causes them headaches? If they could wave a magic wand, what would they fix? What problems would they want to get rid of? Key things that we were looking for here is emotive. We want to look at emotional things. How does it make them feel? If you've never heard this before, pain sells. And what I mean by that is the bigger the pain, the bigger the outcome, the bigger the value, the bigger the problem, the bigger the reward. One simple way to think about it is if we're building a service or we're helping a client, we can have a pain-based approach or we can have a vitamin-based approach. So are we providing something that's nice to have? Yeah, we all know vitamins are good for us, right? But, if you don't take them, you're not going to die. But pain relief, like painkillers and medicine, well, if you don't take those, you're going to continue with a headache, or worse, you're going to be in real trouble and, God forbid. So we've got to focus on that problem identification. And we don't want to do it across too big of an audience. Don't go 50, 100 people because that will take you too long. Remember, this is a 90 to 120 day plan. So 15 to 20 people. Do not sell. Do not pitch. You have no idea of what problem you're going to service at the moment. Even if you are a recruiter and what you do is recruitment services, which is to provide candidates and to hire the best people, ignore that, right? We will come back to your core offering in a minute. We have to go into this with an open mind. So we're going to go into problem identification. The next thing that we're going to go through is what's called problem ideation. Now, through that group of 15 to 20 individuals that you've spoken with, we're going to formulate themes. We're going to find common themes of problems or feelings or challenges that resonates, that maybe we can look at targeting. And why do we do that? Well, we don't ever want to be building a offering that is unrepeatable, that is unscalable. Worst thing to do is build a business and go and do a deal and you can't repeat that deal. And I've had a couple of clients that have done that. They went into new markets, didn't test the market fully, won really good deals. They won 7-figure deals. I had one client who did a £1.5 million deal. But it was such a niche space. It was such a niche problem. They couldn't repeat it. So yes, they earned some good money off it, but all the back end operational overheads they couldn't get away from. So we've got problem ideation. We've tested those themes. Next thing we want to be going to is what I call service creation. So what we're doing is we're formulating an idea of what we could do based upon what we know, core offering, to address that. But crucially, I want to look at things that are beyond the core. So using recruitment as the example again, if I'm placing candidates, I'm hiring, contractors or permanent individuals, I'm looking for the best skills in the market, then that's a given, right? I need the individual, but what I've got to be thinking about is what can I layer on top of that individual or that core offering that is going to make that more robust, more valuable, more sticky, not just the individual, but the service that we provide as an organisation. One of the key things I'm trying to drive here is lifetime value. If we've won a client, it takes a lot of time to win a client. We want to keep that client for as long as possible. So the more that we think about, servicing that client on a long term. So we want to think about ways that we could go above and beyond that. And I'm going to give you some ideas in a second. The next one we want to be looking at doing is community building. So the chances are, I know nothing about healthcare, not a thing. I know nothing about social work. I've gone and spoken to 15, 20 individuals. I've got an idea of what those problems are, but how am I going to facilitate those conversations moving forward? How am I going to build credibility and trust? Well, I haven't got time to go and qualify as a social worker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find social workers. I'm going to find seasoned social workers in the industry, and I'm going to build a community of the shit hot social workers that are maybe advisors. They teach social work. They work at universities. They do a lot of thought leadership, white papers. You want these pioneering, forward-thinking people, and we're going to build this community, and we're going to bring them into the journey with us. We're going to explain to them what we're looking to do. We're going to explain to them the value adds that we're looking to try and create. We're going to explain to them the problems we're trying to solve, and we're going to bring them into our community, and we're going to incentivize them. Now, you can incentivize them financially. You can incentivize them by offering them to be part of the first part of the process. So the first person you deploy, you can offer them consultancy, type work. We'll get to those in a second. In my experience, one thing that humans are great at is helping each other when we ask. And if we ask, if we frame the question and we frame the journey in the right way, people will help. So we don't need hundreds, we need 50 to 100, because you've got to be able to manage this community, and you've got to treat this community like absolute gold. So we've got our community, we've got an initial idea of our service creation, and it is initial idea. Now what we're going to do is we're going to develop some recurring, repeatable, scalable services using our community experts to provide insight. We're going to then formulate these bolt-on services. So we want to develop 2 or 3 recurring services that go around a candidate being required. So what could we consider? Well, we could think about, talent mapping, what's going on in the market, building some sort of trend analysis. Why are social workers moving from the north of the country to the south? Why are more and more people emigrating to become social workers? What are particular challenges in the industry? Organizational design, whatever. I'm really thinking off the cuff here. Now, if you don't know how to do this and you haven't got an idea of how to deliver this, then look for partners as well. So similar to the community, that community is your expertise, really. So ask them, right? Your job in creating this business is really to drive the ideation forward and then utilize the right components. So if you want to go and do, organizational design, then ask your community of experts. Who do you know that's really good at social work, planning, and then formulate some partnerships. And again, bring them into the journey, explain, incentivize through referrals and everything else. But the key thing here is don't get sidetracked. Don't think you can't. You've got to really work to do this, and to develop this forward. Because what that's going to lead us into is a concept called lead magnets. And it's probably something you may have heard of before if you've ever done any business development. What is a lead magnet? And it's a very generic term for creating appetite and interest. Now, the way that we're going to do that is we're going to potentially run some roundtables. We're going to offer to invite certain prospective clients to come and join us. Very small. We don't want this as more than 20 to 30 people at these roundtables, where we're going to bring a panel of our advisors and our experts, and we're going to talk about some key topics in the industry, some key challenges related back to those themes that you found. So you're bringing this forward, you're further validating it, you're further getting resonance. And your experts, your community, are going to be the ones that people are buying into. They're coming to listen to this panel of experts. Now, off the back of that, you've got to network like crazy. You've got to get in front of these people. You've got to build those relationships, and you've got to network like crazy. But the one thing you're not doing yet is you are not selling. You are absolutely not selling or positioning any service or what you do. This is not the point. So on a timeline, I would say we're probably around 60 days by now, 45 to 60 days. That's how long it should take you to build this process. So where does that lead us after lead magnets? Well, we need to keep that thought process going. We need to we need to continue offering up value. So if we're not offering value, we can't command, revenue, certainly not good revenue. And value is created when problems and pains are removed. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to create and publish content. Depending upon the community, the channels that you use, social media, could be LinkedIn, could be Facebook, could be Instagram, could be X, YouTube. YouTube is a really, really good one nowadays. Hence why I'm on here. But we need, wherever these people gravitate and come together, we need to build and publish content two to three times a week. It cannot be about selling. It has to be about, again, value and insight and intelligence and thought leadership, creating stimulus. And again, you're going to use your community to do this. This is why you have to have this community so well nurtured. You've got to really treat that community incredibly well. So you're going to offer up this content, and that's going to create this audience, which is going to become your organic funnel, your sales funnel, if you like. Now, in parallel to doing that, you're going to go and find your top 100 to 200 clients, depending upon how big your industry is. Just as a FYI, if there is only 100 businesses in your niche, then don't focus there, unless you're doing really, really big services like, 50, 100 million pound deals. But even then, you're going to run out of runway very, very quickly. Your conversion rate is going to be quite low to start with. So go and find, 100 to 200 prospective clients, and you want to build a network, build relationships like mad. Again, your focus has to be on learning, understanding, empathy. What problems are they having? What challenges are they having? Almost like you're being a bloody counsellor, right? What problems they got, listen to them, empathise with them, relate for them. So if you've been into an organisation, I've just come out of a social work community in the north of England, and I'm now down in the south of England meeting, a social work manager. Relate. One of the things I heard from such and such, that's a common problem I keep hearing. This is how that social work organisation has addressed that. Have you thought about doing this? None of this is about selling. This is all about building relationships and positioning. Now we're going to get into the initial sell. And what we're going to do is we're going to offer up some sort of initial consultation. Very short-lived, 2-4 weeks maybe, but it's paid. And, what type of paid engagement that will be, let's just call it a discovery. A bit of business analysis, a bit of, social work, organizational discovery. Again, I'm just making that up for a second. And the key thing here is what you're going to offer up to that client is you're going to go, look, I'm going to bring my top social work organizational design expert into your business to help you look at your 3-year roadmap. Because actually you may not need to hire in this way. You're talking about hiring these individuals in 3-6 months. You may not even need them, right? We may be able to do this in a different way. You may be able to actually hold off on hiring. So I'm going to save you some money. But that initial consultation is what sows the seed of credibility and trust. Absolutely critical. Off the back of that consultation, what we're going to deliver back to them is obviously a very detailed analysis and report, a deep dive into what that consultant, that expert, your community expert has found. Now, this is where the gold comes from. Historically, in all my years and all my experience across hundreds of engagements. So hopefully you're still listening. Beyond what I do independently, I used to do this for the two biggest recruitment companies in the world. You may have heard of them, you may not, but Manpower and Adecco, pretty big, both turning over $25-ish billion each. And even prior to that, I was a leader of professional services and consultancy. So my job was always to uncover problems and to position services that drove value, but not short-term, but long-term value. And I use this tactic in every single engagement, and it works. And it gets better the more that you understand your client, the ICP, the industry, the niche. But I would say on average across all of the engagements that I've done with clients, 50% of the time, that initial consultation, that 2 to 4 week consultation will lead to something else. It could be a 3 to 6 month engagement. It could be hiring and sourcing, some permanent contractor candidates. If you're not working in recruitment, it would lead into something else. That's why we need to have the value-added services. That's why we need to have an idea of what additional things that we should be building and creating. And building services is not a non-stop it doesn't, you build a service once and then you stop. It is an iterative process. So, don't just think, oh, I've got these services, these clients are buying this initial consultation, I'll stop. No, always iterate, always test, always measure, always keep learning. And at the end of that, what do we need to do? You have got to make sure, and this is something I see recruiters fail at time and time again, recruitment businesses fail at, is just being brilliant, shit hot, excuse my language, but you've got to be bloody excellent at client communication, client management, relationship management, to the point that it's almost not obsessive, but you do not ever want that client to be thinking or questioning, why am I using this organization? I've had to guess what they're going to tell me. I've not heard from them. If you've got nothing to say, if you're waiting for something, then tell them, right? If you're waiting for the report to be created and you've set a deadline and that deadline is still on track 2 weeks out, just let them know, just letting you know everything's on track. We'll be back to you in a week. You cannot underestimate the value of comms, as the saying goes. It takes a lifetime to build, credibility, but it can be destroyed, in seconds. So that process there should take you anywhere between 90 and 120 days. When I go into a client, and again, I've gone through this, this 23, 24 minutes we've been talking about this. I spend 3 months with clients doing this, and then they continue to drive this process over a couple of years to iteratively increase their revenues. And back to the start of the video, I said, every single client I've done this with, every single one has earned, mid 7 figures upwards. I've had some clients go from zero, they were already recruitment businesses, so they had a bit of investment and cash capital. But I've had some clients go from 0 to 25 million in 2 years. I've had one client go from 0 to 14 million in 14 months. Started slowly but rapidly grew, and then they won an engagement that was a 5.5 million project. They won another one which was a 2 million project, and these were all much better engagements. So what you do, you rinse, repeat, continually test, continuously measure, continuously iterate. You continue to manage that community. You make sure that community is serving value. You make sure you provide the value back to that community. You treat them incredibly well. They are your credibility. They are your product. And without them, you're going to really, really struggle. And one of the things I try and advocate for all my clients, and I would say the same for you, is keep your business lean. Use external expertise. Don't hire these people internally on a full-time basis. You won't need them on a full-time basis. Use them on a fractional basis. And if you don't know what fractional means, then I'm going to do another video on the whole fractional model and why it's really prevalent in the market. And just to finish up the video, well, everything I've talked about, how does that make this a future-proof business, right? Because we've not talked about anything to do with AI. We've not talked about, market trends or anything like that. And the reason is quite simple. AI is something that we are going to have to accept and deal with. that from a task-oriented aspect, and even from a creative aspect, AI is incredibly good and will be faster than what we can do. But the one thing that AI can't do is build human, intrinsic, value-based relationships, deep-rooted relationships, and the human touch, the human element. And that is something that is missing a lot in a lot of opportunities and a lot of businesses I go into. Yes, people are talking to people and servicing, but they're not. There's no intrinsic value there. It's seen as a very much a facilitation relationship. You have a need, I have a solution. Let me just facilitate that. You need to hire an individual. I've got a candidate. Here you go. Well, where's the nurturing? Where's the development? Where's the long-time relationship creation there? So what we've got to think about doing, especially if you're a service-based organisation, is building that human value. And that's how you're going to future-proof against AI. You're going to have to adopt AI at some point. But by doing this and pivoting and taking this consultative approach, you're going to be in a much better place to offer up value to your clients and then build and scale. So that's how I have helped, 40 plus clients get to 7 and 8 figure businesses over the past 6 years. All of those have done it in under 2 years. That's what I would do if I had to do it again tomorrow. If I had to build my own consultancy, even, that's what I would do. So hopefully you found this valuable. I look forward to you hopefully tuning in a future video. If you like what you hear, please feel free to drop some comments. If you want to have a chat with me, I'll probably put a link in and you can book a call in when we can have a chat about maybe if you need my help. But yeah, thank you very much for taking the time and have a great day.